Hello everyone. Let us talk about privatization. Privatization of government institutions, which is going on right now. The present day central government is very much in favor of privatization. So, is it good or is it bad? Well, there is nothing as black and white. There is all gray. There are some advantages and some disadvantages. Recently, we have seen that in the budgets of previous years, privatization of different institutions, government institutions, PSUs, are proposed. So, are they good? Are they bad? Let's talk about the advantages first. Number one advantage of privatization is the decrease of corruption. In private firms, we can see that the corruption is very less, whereas in the government firms, the PSUs, the government banks, corruption is way higher. So, corruption decreases in in private institutions. Number two, efficiency. Private players are very much efficient. Let us take again take the example of banks. If we go to a government bank, then we have to stand in those large queues, and the efficiency is not as good as the private bank. In private bank, the whole customer experience is very nice. Also, due to competition, private banks provide provide best deals to the customers, and they are very much efficient. So efficiency increases because there is a motivation of earning profits, whereas in government banks, the people sitting at the higher levels, or any government institution, the people sitting at the higher levels are not very motivated because they are getting a fixed salary and nothing else. So, but in private institutions, private companies, people sitting in the in the uh, higher hierarchy, the board of directors are there. They are generally the shareholders of the company, so they are very much motivated to run the company and get the profits drawn. So efficiency is incomparable. If we try to compare the private companies and the government companies. uh, Another thing is innovation. In private companies, we can see there is a lot of innovation. Let's take any example uh, of a company which have done immensely well in innovation, like Indian example TCS, Infosys. Foreign examples like Tesla and Apple and Microsoft. All these are private companies. Statistics have proven that in private companies, innovation is a lot more if we compare it to government companies, because again, motivation of earning profits and motivation for innovation is not much in government companies as compared to the private companies. Number three is expansion. Generally, the government companies are very rigid in nature. There are a lot of procedures. There are a lot of stakeholders. Very much, very much things depend on the government. What are the policymakers thinking, and also the inter parties relations is also there. So suppose if a government of if a government of uh, if one government the government switches, and the opinion of the new government changes, then the policies within the government company will also change. And so these are a lot of factors define that what will be done in the company. So there is a friction in expansion, but in private companies there is a lot of expansion scope. The board of directors, the managers, the shareholders, all are very much motivated, and they want to expand the company as much as they can. So that is why we can see that the majority of the global players from India are private firms. Also, if we see globally, then private companies expand at a higher rate as we compare to the government companies. For example, UPI is an exceptionally nice idea, and but it is there is a lot of friction in expanding it. There are very government to government talks and all. But if we talk about TCS, Infosys, their IT exports are very high. There is a lesser amount of friction. People The things goes on very smoothly. So that is why expansion is very nice, very high in private firms. So, and another advantage is capitalism increases. So capitalism is very important part of the society. If capitalism increase, then the government will get more tax. Then people will get more jobs, and that is how the privatization works in the favor of society. So these were all the advantages of privatization. Let us talk about the black side, the disadvantages. Number one, the profit just goes on to one or only a small group of people that are the shareholders of the company, of the private firm. But if we compare it with the government firms, like let's say any PSU, like ONGC or LIC, the whatever is the profit goes to the government, and the government can reallocate that profit for the betterment of a common man. So the profit gets distributed throughout the country indirectly. As I mentioned, that in private firms, the profit is consolidated for only a few wealthy people. So the idea of socialism gets rejected in privatization, whereas capitalism increases but socialism decreases. And socialism is necessary to some extent. Everyone, the government must have the funds to allocate to for the upliftment of people. But due to privatization, the government is not able to extract the funds for that. Uh, another disadvantage of privatization is increase in prices. Let's say the railway gets privatized. So today, the ticket we are getting to travel 250 kilometers is let's say 200 rupees. But if private players comes in, then they will have a monopoly on the railway, and also they will be able to increase the prices. Then how will a man who is who is an who is an Bihari immigrant in Delhi and working as a construction laborer will be able to reach his home at affordable price. So the poor people, the crust is that the poor people will not be able to afford traveling in the country. The price increases, and also this is a very relatable example, a very recent example can be the farm bills. In the farm bills, the crust was that the the contractor farming will be introduced. So private players will come in. So farmers will sell their produce to the private players. The private players will be able to adjust the price that they want to sell the food items further. So the common people like us mm, will face price hike, and that will be very devastating for the poor people. So the poor gets a hit in privatization. Talking about some other things like railway, like LIC. So LIC is a gem. LIC holds majority of the stake in the insurance market in India. So LIC. So if we talk about the current time, 100% stake of LIC is with the government. But the talks of IPO of LIC has been there in the parliament, and it has been approved. Soon we will see the IPO of LIC will come in the market. But LIC is a gem. Many a time we have seen that the companies, that the government companies or any private companies which go bankrupt, then LIC came in and buy that company and saved that company. But despite of producing so much of output for the government is selling the stake of LIC. So that is not good. That is not a smart decision, I think. And other example we can say of schools. Let's say all the schools are privatized. Then the government will own no school. Then the pricing factor will come in. The private players, the private school owners will increase the prices of education. So education will not be affordable for a poor kid, or anyone coming from a uh, any low financial background. So there should be a balance in things. Like today we can see there are government schools, there are private schools. People have choice. Also, anyone can afford education now. There are free schools also. People can get education free. Also, there are schools which provide world class facilities, but they are paid. So there is a balance. So these things must be taken care of. So the conclusion of the whole discussion is that, number one, the things which are essential, like education, like transport, like railways, like food items, like water and electricity facilities. So these things must be governed by the government as much as possible, because these are the basic utilities. And if the private players come in, then the price hike will be there, and that will be a very strong hit strong hit for the poor. But the things which are which can be which can be uh, privatized must be privatized. Like banks is a major example of that. Banks must be privatized, because in government banks, the efficiency is very low. And they are not able the government banks are not able to cope up uh, with the competition in the banking sector. So banks must be privatized, I think. And the airline sector can also be privatized, because airline Air India was not doing very much good for the government. The government sold it. I think that was a very nice decision. And the Tata Group will now uh, took over the airline. So things like any luxurious hotels. So these things must not be taken care by the government, because it is not the government's business to do business. So but in the things which are the basic utilities that affect the common man of India, that the government must look on. Thank you very much.